Hey, we don't take ourselves seriously, but we deal with some pretty serious topics here on Radically Rational. Except for today, that's out the window. Today, boys just want to have fun. Let the games begin. That's next on Radically Rational, the podcast. Hello and welcome to this edition of Radically Rational, the podcast. Radically Rational, we're bringing facts back into fashion. We're making simple sanity sexy again. Crazy is not cool. Those are the rules, and if I violate them, I will hear about it from an 8-year-old girl.
You're crazy.
Yeah, I'm getting used to it. Boys just want to have fun. I have so much looking forward to this conversation. It's a guy that I've known reputationally for a long time. We have a mutual friend that kind of got us together. So I will start by introducing him as former Major League Baseball player, Keith Moreland. But there's a lot more to it than that. Keith, thank you so much. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today? I'm ready for, it's hot in Texas and I'm not used to this cold weather. I'm ready for the spring to get here.
Oh, you and me both. And yes, it is a little chilly this morning as we record this, no question about it. You know, Keith, I've never bought this stuff about he who dies with the most toys wins, but I do think that he who has the most life experiences has lived a wonderful life. Man, you may be the gold medalist. You have done it all. You have lived a really blessed life.
Well, the good Lord has allowed me to do a few things that, and then people around you have to help you in that scenario. There's no question. You mentioned Bill Schoening. He's one of the guys that got me involved in the 25-year career as a broadcaster that I have now. And then you go back to when I was in Chicago and getting to know some people there and doing a little talk show there. So, and then, by the way, winning a world championship in Philadelphia in 1980.
Yeah, not too bad for sure. So we'll go through the chronology here and some of the amazing things you've done. You were a football player at the University of Texas, and a good one. You were maybe as good a baseball player as that school ever turned out. I mean, you are one of the elite college baseball players of all time. We'll go through that. Then you have a 12-year major league career. Let's see, you got the Phillies, you got the Cubs, you got the Padres, you got the Tigers, you got the Orioles. Then you get into broadcasting, and you're part of that WGN magic. That must have been amazing.
You know, I really enjoyed that. I mean, it starts long before that. Just a real quick story. I'm in Austin. I had come back, got my degree from the University of Texas after I finished my major league career, where they called me Pops every day when I went into class, as this old man going to school at nearly 40 years old. And, I looked at that, and Bill Schoening was the voice of the Longhorns at the time. He says, "Would you like to do any baseball?" He had heard that I had done a radio show, and I said, "Yeah, I would love to." And so I recorded. I still have some of those recordings of those first ball games, and it was not very good, I got to tell you, but it turned into a secondary career, and I really appreciate the help from him and then just the opportunities to do different things across the country, doing football and baseball since 1994.
Bill Schoening, who of course now is the radio voice of the NBA's San Antonio Spurs and one of the really fine announcers in all of basketball. Okay, so you've done football color with Bill Schoening on University of Texas Longhorn games. And I love baseball, but I'm primarily a football guy. And so I've heard so many of these broadcasts, and you have this unbelievable ability. I've only seen a couple of people able to do this. Chris Collinsworth would be one. But you've always had the ability as an analyst to see all 22 without replay. Man, that's a gift.
Well, you look at scenarios. It's all about your prep time. I mean, all the time I try to talk to young announcers now, or people that want to, hey, I'd really like to get into this, or they're in communication school or broadcast school. There's some wonderful ones now across the country. And I say two things you've got to do. One, you've got to listen. If you're an analyst, you have to listen to what the play-by-play guy is saying. That way you're not repeating. So that's not what somebody out there, you're called an analyst because you've got to analyze the play. And then the second part of it, I always split the field in half. And And to do that, that's what you sort of get more of 11 on 11. And that scenario, it's easier to pick up what's going on the backside of that because the play-by-play guy is telling you what's happening with the football.
I'm very fortunate. I'm so lucky. I still get a chance to do a lot of football play-by-play. And I found that it really does fill a vacuum for me because it's almost like being a player again in a way because you're so locked in, you're so zoned, but nobody's trying to take your head off. But I find that I'm really in a it's almost a state of ecstasy. I just enjoy doing it so much. Is it a high for you?
Oh, no question. Quick story. I mean, the first time that I was working on the University of Texas broadcast, we were playing Oklahoma, and there's nothing quite like that game, walking down that tunnel in the Cotton Bowl to line up and play Oklahoma. I had the same feeling that I did the last time I walked down that tunnel in uniform to take on the Sooners the first time I was going to broadcast that game. So it was really a unique feeling. I don't know that any other time I've had it as intense as that first one, but it was still there every time that I've done that game. And I've done that game, I think 14 times. And that is a fun ball game to broadcast.
Let's continue with the story of your career as a football player at Texas. You played for Darrell Royal. And I started my broadcast career, television career in Austin in 1975, a year that you would be familiar with. And just getting to be around Darrell Royal and seeing the aura there, what are some of your reminiscences of him? And I think it's almost impossible now to believe that he retired when he was 51.
Yeah, and it was a stun to any and all of us, no question about it. He did not like, quite frankly, and Coach Royal, I have spent a lot of time with him in his retirement, played in this golf tournament, played a lot of golf with him, was around him an awful lot. And I don't know how many times I heard him say he just did not like the direction of college football as much as anything else that was going on. He had some stuff, obviously, with his kids away from the field that were very serious, and it was taking a toll on him and whatever. And it is an intense job, especially at the University of Texas. The Wolves are always out. So, I really felt that it was something that surprised us. I think it was so good for Coach. He later on was a much freer and easier man. You could tell life was so much more fun for him, and he was so great to all of us afterward. But I know that had to be a devastating call at 51 to hang up a career, which was nothing short of spectacular, because that, to win 167 games, and that's how many won in college during a time over the course of 19 years, that means you're winning almost 10 a year.
Amazing. Keith, of course, I'll defer to you, but it was always my impression that Coach Royal really did not like recruiting and really did not like Barry Switzer, correct?
Oh, but I would say yes on both of those. And the recruiting part of it was not him going out and going to a young man and asking them or offering them the opportunity to go to school. It was everything that was around recruiting and the illegal stuff that was going on. He was not going to be in part of, and he knew that where it was headed. And boy, the decades in the Southwest Conference of the 1980s. Well, let's go back and look at all the teams that were at some point either suspended, not bowl eligible, including a death sentence to SMU during that time. So he saw that coming before. That's what forced him into retirement, no question. And I look at recruiting now and the NIL. Speaking another subject, we're in the Wild West right now in college football, no question.
Since you opened that can of worms, I got to go with that. Between the transfer portal and NIL, Wild West is right. I don't think anybody's thought their way all the way through this, and we're going to be in for some rude surprises.
Oh, yes, sir. No doubt about it. I am not Hey, I tell you, I put everything out on my shoulders, so you know where it is. I'm not a very political person, and I don't think that our political situation right now is leading to anything positive. But we, as a Congress, are going to have to address this issue because each state has tried to address the issue, but we have 50 states. That could be 50 different laws. I mean, right now, it is the Wild West, and we're going to continue to see these numbers explode where kids are getting 7-figure deals and have not taken a snap of college football.
Keith, this is why this gets into my head, because if I look at this constitutionally, legally, with respect to labor laws, fairness, why can't players move? Why can't players get compensated when we see what's going on with coaches? So I look at it with my brain and I think, I really can't take exception with any of this. But then I think, but you're messing with my game. How do you feel?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, if there's anything, I love college football. I think probably for me, it is the one sport. I'll put it this way. I mean, I've got televisions all over the place and different ways to get games through the internet and over linear networks. And if there's a football game on, I am looking at it from an analyst standpoint of why is this happening? What's going on, to learn. You just want to get better at your profession, and the way to do that is to watch. And we're going to stop seeing. We're going to have 64 teams. And there's going to be the haves and the have-nots. We've been at the haves and the have-nots for a while, but this is going to really separate the top from the bottom, because there are leagues out there like the Sun Belt, the Mid-American Conference, the Mountain West, that are going to be left, and probably the Big 12, quite frankly, are going to be left out and not going to be in. We're not going to have an NCAA where it covers that many schools. We're going to have somebody that's covering 64 schools, and then there's everybody else.
Going to be a brand new landscape, and in fact already is. We mentioned the fact that you played for Darrell Royal at the University of Texas, but you also played baseball for one of the finest gentlemen I have ever met, Cliff Gustafson. Just an amazing person. I think when I look back on the people who really impacted me as a person in sports, I recall that really it's been two baseball coaches, Cliff Gustafson at Texas and Jerry Kendall at Arizona. What do you remember about Gus?
Well, let's start with the fact is what a unique person that Coach Gus was. Those that don't know the history, this is a man that won 8 state titles at South San in San Antonio. Had never really thought about being a college coach. And Darrell Royal picks up the phone and calls him and starts to talk to him. And as the story was told to me, Coach Gus said to Coach Ross, he said, well, I'll help you get somebody going. He says, no, Coach, I want you to be our baseball coach. And that was just something, because you just don't see guys jump from high school to college, from head coach to head coach, to be one of the premier programs, a program that's gone 37 times to the College World Series, to be the head man, to take over for an icon like Bibb Falk. So first of all, you have to know what kind of person that Coach Gus was to accept that, see that, understand that. And then once you got on campus with you, there's 2 things that you weren't going to do. You were going to learn how to win with honor, lose with dignity, and you were going to understand what it took in whatever commitment. And so many ex-Texas baseball players that played for Coach Gus had marvelous careers, maybe not just in the game of baseball, but outside of the game of baseball. He taught you to be a man along with being a baseball player.
Okay, here's my first contact with Coach Gus. When I first became aware of his existence, I'm from Lockhart, and I was a little boy in Lockhart, and I loved Lockhart Lion baseball. And Lockhart Lions had a great baseball team, and year after year after year, they'd win district, they'd win the next by district, they'd go to regionals, they'd get in the semifinals, and they would meet South San and get beat 1-0, and that happened every year.
and I guarantee you that South San may not have got a hit in that game, but they would find a way to get on. get him bunted to second base. Coach Gus is again, the other thing is he had the unique ability to say to you, hey, you do this little job, and another 8 guys do their little job of what you're asked to do. You can find a way to win. And that's what he could do, because he didn't have the best players. He didn't have the best arms. He didn't have the best facilities, but he knew how to win baseball games. And I took that with me. I think that was a very important part of me getting to the big leagues and proving to teams that I could help you win. And because I didn't care what my numbers were as much as let's win ball games and win championships.
I am listening to you, and I'm hearing that philosophy kind of guide your life when you talk about attention to detail, the things we were talking about earlier, how you prepare for a broadcast. It's the same thing.
You have to. I mean, if you're committed to anything, and it's something that you enjoy doing, I mean, of course, everybody needs to find it. I've been very fortunate. I've been God blessed to find things that really I enjoy doing. So it's very easy to prepare. It's not work in that scenario. There's so many people that are not doing what they want to do, or if they're doing what they want to do, they're doing it lackadaisical and not attacking it with some pride and some principle and get the job done. And again, that comes from obviously parents. Is where it starts at home. Then the people you play for and the integrity of the people you play for. And I'm telling you, that's Cliff Gustafson in a nutshell.
Let's have you take modesty off the table for just a second. You could make a case that you had as great a college baseball career as anybody ever. 3-time All-American, 3 trips to the College World Series, a College World Series championship. You're a member of the 70s all-decade College World Series team. Just astronomical numbers. When did you start to be aware of the fact that you had that kind of ability?
I always was very confident that I could play the game of baseball. You know, just a quick story again to just get some of the background. I waited. I had 100 at that time. You know, now you get 5 offers. You get so many visits. I visited everywhere in the world to play football, and every place that I went to, talking to that head coach, they'd offer me a scholarship, and I said, "Well, I'm not going to come here unless I can play baseball too." And so many of them said, "We don't even know you play baseball, so no, won't do that." I was recruited. Pat Patterson was the area coach in the Metroplex in Dallas that I was raised. He was the defensive line coach, and he came in and says, "We're going to offer you a scholarship. We'd like for you to come to Austin." I came to Austin and talked to Coach Roll, and he said, "Well, I tell you what, I haven't talked to Coach Gus, but if you can go out and you can make their team and you're an integral part of their baseball team, you do not have to go through spring ball. You may be a little bit behind here on this side on football when you come back over, but if that's what you want to do." And Coach Roll was smart in that sense that he hadn't talked to Coach Gus. Well, Coach Gus really didn't know much about me as a player either, but his great friend was Enos Seymour at Oklahoma, was the head baseball coach. Well, that summer I'd had a magnificent summer, and that we'd won the Connie Mack World Series in Farmington, New Mexico. And I won the batting title there and was the MVP. And when that happened, Coach Seymour offered me a baseball job. And I said, "Well, you know, I've been recruited to play football at Oklahoma, but they say I can't play baseball." He says, "I'll go back and change that right now." Well, he called Cliff when I committed to play football at the University of Texas and told Coach Gus that, "Hey, you better let Moreland come out there because this guy can play." And that's how it sort of happened. And then I get out for spring baseball of 1973. And I'm not getting in any inter-squad games. I really haven't had any chance. And the starting quarterback was a friend of mine named Alan Lowry from Irving, Texas, for the football team. Alan was playing baseball at the same time, stepped on a ball during BP and turned his ankle. And I got to move into third base, hit a home run off of Ron Rosnowski, a returning all-conference player. And I was in the lineup hitting third by the start of the season, and the rest is history.
Yeah, but you wound up only hitting .388 for your college career. Slacker.
Yeah, well, I only hit .340 as a freshman. So that's the problem.
Just absolutely amazing. So there are any number of reasons when I look at your life and your resume and your bio why I know you're a smart guy, but at the top of the list, you started off as a catcher, and then you were smart enough to know that's enough of that stuff.
Well, that's interesting. The story to that one too. There's always a story. That's the great thing about sports to me, and somebody that covers it, and you have too, is the stories of the people behind that are there. I mean, yeah, you see them as a player, but what is that story? Well, I was drafted, had a marvelous first year out in the minor leagues, and the Phillies came to me and said, we have a guy that's only 4 years older than you, and Mike Schmidt's already got 150 home runs in the big leagues. You're not playing third for us. So I said, well, find a position, because I don't care where I played. I want to get to the big leagues. And so they said, well, we're lacking in the organization of catching. And well, I spent a year of training with they sent a specialized catcher guy with me, the catching instructor, and he was around almost every game. We worked before the games. I played minor league games. Then I went to Florida Instructional League, which is a 6-week program that now is done. In fact, the only people in camp are these instructional league people they're high in the minor leagues for all these clubs. That's the only people in camp, because Major League Baseball is not there. We'll get to that point at some point in this conversation as well. But and then I went to Maracaibo, Venezuela, and had to learn to catch. So in 1 year, I went from never having been a catcher to a big league camp behind the plate and catching spring training big league games. So it took a while for me to get the position, but that's the transition to catcher.
The idea is to get on the field, and you found a way, and that's absolutely great. So later in your major league career, you referenced the fact that young players called you Pops, but Larry Boa called you Zonk. What was that all about?
Well, that's an interesting story. At the time when I played college football, the Dolphins were fantastic, and Larry Zonka was behind the plate. Well, when you're in the minor leagues and you're making $500 a month, you're all together, 4 guys in 2-bedroom apartments with twin beds, because you're making $500 a month and you're trying your best to get through. The only thing we could do for entertainment after the game was, if we lived in this apartment and it had a volleyball pool. Well, the volleyball net got ripped down in the first week, but we just started playing football, throwing a little small football around the pool, and you had to dunk a guy for him to be tackled. Well, and nobody could get me under the water, so they started nicknaming me Zonk, and that's the way the name's still. And then Boa picked it up in spring training when some of the young guys that were with me says, "Why do they call you Zonk?" And I told them the story, so it became Zonk, and that's the way it's been since then. And pretty much everybody I played with, they don't call me Keith, Red, and they could get away with that, because I did have pretty flaming red hair for a long time. Don't have much of it left, but that's how Zonk came about.
All you needed was a 39 on the jersey, for sure. So, you know what? Of all your qualities, of all your achievements, I would say that longevity would be near the top of the list. I mean, 12 years in the major leagues, that in and of itself is quite an accomplishment.
I'm very proud of that. And my body was capable of going a little longer, but you guys, especially young folks, don't realize what's going on. I told you we'd get back to the major league situation. We had a thing called collusion in 89, 90, and 91. Peter Uberoff was commissioner of baseball, and he said, we're going to stop free agency. And the way we do that is nobody offer anybody else a job. So I was a free agent at the end of the 89 season. I had a really good year, and I filed for free agency, and nobody offered me a contract. And that's what ended my career. We won the lawsuit over that. You received some financial money from that, but it was not like going out playing. I think I could have played one more year, possibly two, if that hadn't been the way that it ended. And I'm not alone in that. There's a bunch of us that were in that same boat that couldn't find jobs because the collusion of the owners.
Okay, since you're referencing this, Why is it that historically the relationship between baseball owners and players has been really historically nasty? I know just in my journalism career, I covered I don't know how many baseball work stoppages, and it was always nasty. And it was like Marvin Miller was like my uncle. I was talking to him so often. How did that evolve, and why is it that way right now? The NFL is getting almost as nasty, but if you look back at it, those two sides just have never liked each other, and it seems personal at times.
Well, it has been personal. You have to go back to history to guys that gave up their entire careers and everything right in the middle of a fantastic, maybe a Hall of Fame career. A man named Kirk Flood said, "You can't tell me who and what I can play for. That's not the American way." And he filed and won a suit that it allowed free agency. And what free agency did, it is all of a sudden it made the salaries go up, no question. And so we've had these work stoppages because the owners for 100 years, that owners of Major League Baseball teams, salary of players was about 15. This is a number for this. I know it's a fact, 15 to 17%. And in 1981, we went on strike to get that number of of the money they brought in and the money they gave to the players up to 27%. And now they're fighting over dollars now between 48 and 52. So now the players are getting half of what the owners are bringing in. And in any business, I've owned a couple of businesses, and I know you've been involved in different businesses. Most of the time, your largest expense as a business owner is the salaries of employees. And so that's what this has been about. And players have stuck together. Guys like Andy Messerschmidt, Catfish Hunter, Kirk Flood, back in those days, they were willing to step up and say, "Hey, if I don't play again, this is not right." And they've gotten courts, and then the courts of baseball players have won. The other unions in sport have not been as strong, and the players haven't stayed together like they have in baseball.
This is so much fun. Our guest is Keith Moreland, who has done it all as a football and baseball player and a broadcaster. And Keith, actually, we kind of crossed paths in Austin, and we kind of crossed paths again later in your major league career, because during most of the time that you were with the Cubs, I was working in St. Louis, and there's just nothing like that Cardinal Cub thing. What do you remember about that?
Oh, gosh, it's interesting you bring that up. I played my first nearly 4 years in Philadelphia, 3.5. And, we had a rivalry, and it was with the Mets, but it wasn't that intense because, quite frankly, at the time, the Mets were not very good. But when I got to Chicago, and that first trip, the first time as a Chicago Cub, we played the St. Louis Cardinals. It was in Wrigley. And at that time, we would have 1,500 to 2,000 people in the stands. People don't realize that nobody was coming to Wrigley. It was the ballpark was getting run down. It was not a good situation. The Wrigley family still owned it. And, they just weren't putting any money back into the game or back into the stadium or anything else. So we're playing in Chicago against the Cardinals, and there's 17,000 Cardinal fans. The whole Wrigley was red. And I was just blown away by that. And I went, this is unbelievable. And then we go to St. Louis, and we had more Cub fans in St. Louis than we did at home playing them in Wrigley. And then it just kept building. And then, oh my gosh, some of the great teams. Ozzie Smith. Well, my career lifetime average, I think, is 279. If Ozzie Smith had been in the league, it'd have been 290. He took away so many base hits from me. But that is an intense rivalry. It will always be there. And it became really 82. The Cardinals won it all. And I saw that. And then in 83, both of us were pretty good. I mean, the second half of the season in Chicago, we had one of the better records in baseball. And in 84, we won the division. So just to be a part of that rivalry is still the most intense as a pro player. That's the most intense rivalry I was around.
And the fan bases for both those teams, they're just so knowledgeable. It's a true story. It was the night before Super Bowl, and I was doing a radio sports talk show, and it's the night before the Super Bowl. And we're taking calls, and it's in St. Louis. And Keith, all anybody wanted to talk about is they had heard rumors that Ozzie Smith was going to slightly change his batting stance from the left side. And that's what they wanted to talk about the night before the Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, no doubt. I mean, it's one of the premier organizations in all of baseball. Everybody talks about the Yankees, but you know who has the second most titles in the history of the sport? They're in St. Louis.
No question about it. And your experiences in Chicago, we referenced this. Hey, look, I'm a baseball fan. So you saw so much Cubs baseball on WGN. You get drawn into that. Same thing with the Braves to a certain extent. And you have been in that environment. And that broadcast legacy is really something. How did that stamp you?
Oh, I tell you, there's so many stories that took place. Obviously, the same year that I came over from the Phillies to the Cubs, Harry Carey signed on to do the games for the Chicago Cubs. So you can't look at the transition of the Cubs to where now it is a tough ticket, and it has been since '83. Dallas Green did such a great job. The Tribune Company bought the ballpark and started borrowing things around it and started putting money into it. And then Dallas did a great job with the architecture of a club and building a club, and see that transition. By the time we got to '84, we had a sellout on every home game after the All-Star game, and still it's one of the toughest tickets in the game. So one of the proud moments as a player is any of us that were on those 82, 83 teams and then into 84 to be part of that transition to make it cool to go to Wrigley, because it was not cool before that. Again, I caught Ferguson Jenkins in Game 2 in 1982 against the Mets with 1,100 people in the stands. And it was Seaver against Fergie Jenkins. What a great game to happen. And we won the game 2-1. And I looked and said, yeah, there were 1,500 people didn't get to see two bona fide Hall of Famers today.
You 12 years in the major leagues, some amazing performances, some truly great numbers. I hate to ask you to single out just one, but do you have one Major League Baseball playing memory that just stands above everything else?
Well, yeah, I do. It's in the 1980 World Series. Obviously, I'm a young guy. I'm a guy that's a backup catcher and then a pinch hitter. And in the even numbered years, you have to go back now to even numbered years. There was a DH, and on the odd numbered years, there was played National League rules.
Uh-huh.
Still haven't figured out why we don't have uniform rules across all of baseball, but we don't. So Greg Luzinski was going to be the DH one night, and he comes down with some food poisoning or whatever. And all of a sudden, Dallas Green comes to me about 15 minutes before the game. He said, yeah, you're hitting behind Schmidt and you're in the game as the DH. And I got 2 hits that night, drove in a couple runs in the World Series, and we won the ball game. And that is a moment that you can't take away. Ended up getting 12 at bats in the World Series, and I mean, did well in that game, got me in other games, and got 4 hits and drove in some runs, and it was a world championship, and I have a ring for it. So that is a huge moment to know that. And then other things. I've played with 24 players in my career that are in Cooperstown as Hall of Famers, and that's a big number. Talking some of the other players, because a lot of other players maybe didn't move around as much as I did at the end of my career, and didn't get a chance to play with teammates that are in Cooperstown. But there's 24 guys that I know that are in the Hall of Fame, and that's special for me.
Yes, it is. And to get to that 1980 World Series, you first had to win the National League Championship, which means you first had to break my heart. What was that all about?
How about four extra inning games?
Exactly. It was the darndest thing I've ever seen.
Well, the history of the Houston Astros says postseason they're going to be tight and they're going to go into extra innings and they're going to be fun. And it's been that way every time that they've gotten in. It seems like I know in that one in '80, they, unfortunately, you're down 5 8-2 to Nolan Ryan, starting the top of the 8 and find a way to win that game in Game 5. That's for me. That's how does that happen? And he was still throwing really good when we got to him, but he walked a guy, got a couple of base hits, and all of a sudden it turned, and we found a way to get it tied and then won it in the 10th.
I was hanging on every pitch, and like I said, I was absolutely heartbroken. But obviously happy for guys like you and the team that you had put together, and the fact that you mentioned that you played with 24 Hall of Famers. Man, what a thing. But even with all of that, Keith, I'm listening to you, and still now with you, it's all about next. Where did you get that mindset?
Well, it comes from my grandmother. Now, think about this: is she lost her husband at 70 years old. They had been dairy farmers all through the Depression, through the war, up through all of the 60s. And then my grandfather passes away, and she says, I can't do this by myself. And then she decides and works for 12 more years as a sous chef at a hospital in McKinney, Texas. And that's when I got her. She says, I can't sit here. That's not I can't milk 31 cows by myself, but I can sure, she was an excellent cook, and she said, I could sure work. And so to see that and to watch her go through that made a huge impression on me, that you just keep going. As long as the good Lord gives you health and allows you to do it, get a passion and attack that passion. I try to say that in young people, when people ask me to come speak, just stay with me here. Can't get it done. Can get it done. That's just, I think that's where you got to approach life.
Well, with that in mind, bring us up to date. Tell us about everything you're doing these days.
Well, again, Corpus Christi today. Last night, I'm covering the Longhorns for the Longhorn Radio Network, and then I also work for ESPN covering college baseball, Little League, and then college football in the fall. So my off times during the year, I love to come to the Texas coast and fish. And I got 2 granddaughters that I like chasing them around as well. And then Cindy and I, my wife, they're approaching 50 years of marriage. So all of that's coming together right here at the same time. But I really enjoy what I'm doing. It keeps you young. And then the other part is, we're starting to see how the specialization in all these sports, and we're seeing athletes that are going to spots you just never thought. I never thought you would see as many people throwing 95 miles an hour, let's say, in baseball as we see now. And that's all about the training when they're young and the mechanics and being able to go out and do some of the things that do. I'm in awe of some of these athletes I watch right now.
That is the perfect opportunity for me to ask you this question, because you would know as much about this as anybody. I've lived a bunch of parallel lives. I spent 11 years as a varsity high school football coach, and there's this growing feeling that high school athletes need to specialize. You need to play one sport. I'm against it. You need to play as many sports as you want to. You become a better person. You become a better athlete. You become a better teammate. What are your feelings about that?
I don't think there's a doubt about that. And I'll take that a step further. Each sport, the great thing about sports, and that's why parents should get their children into sports, it teaches you discipline, self-discipline, not discipline from a parent or discipline from a coach, but the things that you have to do as an individual. So it teaches you such great self-discipline. Baseball teaches you that you can't be aggressive. It's a patient game. On the other side, when you play football, it's about being impatient and
Yes.
that type of thing. In basketball, it for me, the great thing that it does is it's coordination, because the great basketball teams are coordinated with 5 guys that are working as one. So I think you play I think you play everything you can play. When I mean by specialization, I think there are times when you get up maybe into high school that you figure out where you can fit in and what you're the one you enjoy best. I think you specialize in that. because I think there's some things training away from the game that can be better. Obviously, you don't do as much weights in baseball as you do if you're a football player. You don't do as much running in certain sports as you do in other sports. So I think that's the specialization for me. Is I think as a kid up and through, you find the one to your niche, and where you find, I think you play everything. And then once you make a decision that I really, this is one I enjoy the most, I think at that point you have to take some time to expand your knowledge in that sport and maybe some of the different disciplines physically that it takes to play it.
Keith, I am so much enjoying this, and thank you for your time. This might be the question we can wrap it up with. Define good teammate.
Oh my, good teammate. I'll start with Jody Davis, Pete Rose, Mike Schmidt, Ryan Sandberg. Guys who, Andre Dawson, they do two or three things when I say that. One, they explain things and they help you, they teach you things, and they're willing to open up and do that. That's the first thing. Second thing, they are happy when you have success, just like you should be as an athlete, happy for their success. Right. Because there is no I in team. And those are the people that I truly miss. I know that in the you've been a broadcaster and you can't put this on. You've got a team working with you right here doing this. And when you had a good team, that's the thing that is so much fun to laugh and go back and listen to those stories. That's what I can do now. But for me, it's about the great players and how good a teammates they were is what I miss more than anything else in all.
Keith, this has been amazing. And again, my thanks to our mutual friend, Bill Schoening. He told me how much I was going to enjoy this, and he was right. And Keith, thank you so much.
Well, you're more than welcome. I really enjoyed it, and best of luck and stay healthy.
And to you. And it's all about next, as you have said. So Keith Moreland, amazing. Think of everything that he has done in his life and career as a football player, as a baseball player, as a broadcaster, and now as somebody that's passing all that on to younger people. We are very appreciative. One of the cool things about Radically Rational is we can make just about anything fit under that umbrella. At Radically Rational, we're bringing facts back into fashion. We're making simple sanity sexy again. We are rejecting crazy wherever it comes from. Want to invite you to visit our website at radicallyrational.com. Daily blogs, daily videos, and of course, we archive all of these wonderful podcasts. And again, our thanks to Keith Moreland. We will see you next time on Radically Rational, the podcast.